bottom line is, you get on the radio, you say you have shots fired in the school, and you go take care of business.
People expect you in that role as that SRO to address those problems if, God forbid, those things happen in those schools.
Welcome to Three Cops Talk. On this podcast, three active duty police officers discuss behind-the-scenes stories and real-life accounts of what it's like to be a cop. Every episode, you'll get an inside look at the challenges and dangers they face on a daily basis, as well as the triumphs and inspirational moments that make it all worth it. If you want to understand more about the men and women who put their lives on the line for us every day, then this is the show for you. And now your hosts, Chris, Scott, and Sean.
On this episode, we provide our thoughts on the recent acquittal of former Broward County Deputy Scot Peterson after he faced criminal charges for his failure to properly act as the school resource officer during the infamous 2018 Parkland, Florida school massacre. If you have any ideas or topics for the show, please reach out to us at 3copstalk@gmail.com. That's the number 3copstalk@gmail.com. If you'd like to reach us through social media, our details are in the show notes.
Views and opinions expressed in this episode belong solely to the hosts and do not represent the views of any professional organization. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hey guys, what to you is the worst type of music you can stand? Like as cops, like we ride around all day listening to music. Guys, now with the advent of the,
I don't like classical music.
You don't like Bonnie?
Really?
Beethoven?
I love
Beethoven.
classic.
That don't get you in the mood?
Good stuff. Wagner? Wagner
Mm-hmm.
was like heavy metal before heavy metal was heavy metal.
Yeah, that doesn't. Those like big, weird instruments that they used to play in powdered wigs and all that. Like,
Right.
Come on, what was the song in the movie 10 with Bo Derek? Bolero. Come on,
Bolero.
yeah, come on,
man.
That's got to get you rolling.
First movement. That was my first movement in the nether region. I mean, it wasn't my first movement as a.
That's why I brought it up.
I was like totally Bo Derek in that scene. I was like,
moved.
Yeah, for anybody out there,
actually,
just Google Bo Derek.
Right.
Movie
It's
10.
that, and I've just done some training, and my partner, she enjoys country, and I've never been a big fan of country. There's some country like bluegrass I really like and things like that, and I'm about to ostracize about 50% of our audience, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But like country's rough, dude. I can't take it. Can't take it. Like,
but you know what though? My daughter, my youngest one, she's going to school and she interns for a band called Waylon, and yes, that was a plug, by the way.
Nicely done.
And they're like country rock kind of which is really good. I mean, because you got to get into it. Some of the other country you got to kind of get used to.
Everything's about singing about blue jeans and beer.
Right.
I remember, and I'm there for you. And God bless you.
But like some of the stuff now, like
I
I listened to the old country, like in the parents' van on the road trips when I was a kid.
Right.
And it was like,
what, Cash? Johnny Cash?
yeah, and like Waylon Jennings and like the old stuff, but like some of the stuff.
And you guys were like, oh, it's Music City. I'm like, everybody's playing fucking Journey. Like, what are you talking about? This isn't country music. I'm yelling out like, play Folsom, something from Folsom. And then the guy in the band's like grabbing the microphone like Otis
He's
Day
trying to
Nights
and
Animal House. Like,
he's trying to find the Folsom Prison Blues on his iPhone. Like, what?
I hear the train coming. I got that out of the guy at the end of that. And I was like pitching like solo cups and things.
But some of the country now is like it's too kind of pop. It's like more.
Yeah, see, I mean, I don't know.
I like Swift. I blame Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift.
Yeah, right.
Hey, I sold like 3 jars of that water from her concert, though. I got like $200 a jar.
We were in Nashville that last week, and Beyonce played, and it was packed. So
Beyonce?
Yeah,
really.
But
best Beyonce story I ever had was my family and I went up to.
You have multiple Beyonce stories.
Multiple, but the best one I have is
the best one.
We were at Cedar Point, which is a big like water park in Ohio, and my family and I were up there. And all of a sudden, the crew from Cedar Point started ushering everybody out of this like water park. And what I realized, it was Jay-Z and Beyonce were in there, and she was pregnant, and she wanted to have the babies in the lazy river. They have the babies
I knew this
water.
was going somewhere.
And I was like, wow, I guess this is kind of cool.
This is
but
amazing.
in the same sense, man, my family.
All of a sudden, Halo comes on over the loudspeaker.
Yeah, right. We had armbands and stuff. I thought I was going to be in on this. And they're like, no, man, you got to go. Clearly, I had to leave.
You got to go. Something special because I'm even singing it. What the hell?
If you believe that story, you can believe any story. I told my parents that. They were like, really? That was rude.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, Jay-Z's actually going to break down and go
That was rude of him.
Jay-Z's going to break down and go to a cheesy water park in Cedar Point. You know what I mean?
Ohio.
Anyway,
It's a lovely amusement park, though. I'm just going to say for the people from Ohio, it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, that kind of transitions well into, like, when you think about cops, there's something going on right now. And I think to myself, like, I look at things and I try to read, like, what's happening with it in the news and in the social media and the consensus among police officers about something. And one of the things that came up as of late was, I was thinking to myself, what would be to cops the worst kind of cops? And, you know, like, people would say, you know, obviously corrupt cops are bad for cops, things like that. But there's always some backstory, some things like that, you know, along those lines. But I think from reading on the comments that I've seen in this recent case, and it's something we've done a couple different shows on, which was the shootings in Parkland with Chief Pastizzi and Rich Wistocki, and we were talking about, you know, Cruz and how that all went down, was maybe cowardice. I think amongst cowardice, even though it exists, and we have to be honest about it, I think a lot of us really, really despise that. You know, the nature of, you know, being a cop in America is you have to do things alone a lot. And you have to, like, literally be a visual representation. Like, when I was in the military, I could go faraway places and come back and live on the wings of other people that maybe have done those things before me, and it can live on the wings. Like, everybody thinks, like, you know, you're in the band of brothers and stuff like that. You know, to a certain degree, some of us are, and some of us were, and some of us weren't. You know what I mean? But you can live on that. Where police work is here in front of everybody. And I think that Scot Peterson case, where he was just found innocent of the case, that's the charges that he had, the 17 different charges of child negligence, is a good. If there's a barometer on social media, and I'm not talking like, you know, cop hate groups. I'm talking about groups that I follow on LinkedIn that are professional organizations that support police officers. Most of the comments were of just sheer embarrassment, or some of them were outright rage about what happened with that guy. And that's what we wanted to talk about today. So I started out with music, and I'm going something, you know, people can, like, get very emotional about music. Like, you get punched in the face if you say you don't like country music in certain parts in this country. So I'm going to be always looking over my shoulder now. But
be careful.
But I do like heavy metal. That's cool.
No,
Or industrial rock.
I mean,
that's cool.
I listen to everything, to be honest with you. Just some of the rap stuff where they talk about killing cops or beating their girlfriend or killing each other. That's really what I don't like. I mean, I do listen to everything else. I've gotten to enjoy, you know, country. I just never listened to it until my daughter started listening to it. So,
back to that episode.
Yeah, that rap music, not all of it, but just when they want to kill cops and beat girls and kill each other, I just don't get into that.
Rap, I think, is something a plug for rap. Even though, like, I mean, I'm a Beastie Boys guy, and that's how deep I get with rap. Right. Like, you know, white Jewish guys just killing it from New York. You know, the thing about rap is that I think it's, young men need to be articulate, like, in order to express frustration, because the other outlet is just violence. You know, like, young men, it's part of our existence. And I think rap has been something that's, people forget, like, why even it transcends race. Rap now, like, you hear kids, like, the white boys rolling down the strip listening to hardcore rap. I'm like, get out of here, man. But when you get past that image, you think to yourself, like, what that rapper is expressing is very artistic, very articulate. And when you listen to how those guys talk and rap, I mean, they're good. I mean,
they are.
I mean, I personally don't listen to the music, but in the same sense, when you hear something, you're like, yeah, what this guy's saying is often an expression of his frustration, no different than, like, when they were singing about the anti-Vietnam movement in there. That all being said,
I would like to get, you know what, with that being said, I would like to get some of those guys that had that frustration, that do put out this music, that do put out rap. And again, I listen to rap, except, you know, I get put off by the three
cop
that
killer
I
stuff,
mentioned, the cop killer stuff, or, you know, beating your girlfriend, or, you know, killing, you know, another guy or whatever. I would like to get some of those rappers on here to kind of figure out, you know, they're telling their story about what happened, but also what they think a solution would be.
Yeah.
You know?
Here's a little story I like to tell about three bad brothers, you know so well. It's Chris, it's Scott, and me, I'm Sean.
Right.
Sorry.
Anyway,
But
we digress.
Beastie Boys.
But anyway, like, that ebb and flow here, what we're talking about. Again, the frustration I think that a lot of people have with that case is that, you know, when you watch it, if you don't know what was going on, that this was the officer that stayed outside. His name was Scot Peterson. He was an SRO, school resource officer, like Chris. Probably only in title only, I'd say, at this point. And again, some of this, what we're going to talk about today, can be really off-putting to people. You know, if you've never been in the circumstance that, you know, Officer Peterson was in at that time, he was a school resource officer for quite some time at that school. Chris can talk a little bit probably more about that region where he was a school resource officer. And, you know, the median income of Broward County is not exactly cheap, from what I understand, the expectations that people have of school resource officers and the realities of being a school resource officer. But then some of the things that Scot Peterson had said prior to his trial and, charges here in 2023, and then he was acquitted of all of it. Personally, I think if he was tried by a real a real jury of his peers, he'd have been convicted. Cops would have convicted him. I think of that from everything that I've read, and people were unabashedly just jamming him. There was very few people that were like, "Oh yeah, I can completely understand why he did what he did." I think
definitely not in the police world. Yeah,
I think that's something
people were struggling with that.
That begs for people to hear us saying, and talking about it a little bit. But a little backstory on it, obviously 17 people died on February 14th in 2018, and he was one of the school resource officers that was charged. He was the only armed one, as I understood, and he was just basically waiting, and he was doing like what would be considered Columbine-type tactics, where you wait until you get better updates as to what you can do. And after Columbine, and definitely in 2018, and he, as his agency pointed out and testified against him, a training officer, from what I understand, said, no, this pretty much flies in the face of everything we say. If you hear gunshots, you move towards them, and that's the risk of what it is. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But in the same sense, Peterson, when he was inevitably going to be charged, because, there was a bloodlust for this guy. And as you can imagine, 17 kids are being gunned down. You hear gunshots, and you watch the video. He claimed that he was trying to put out a code red, which later was determined that he couldn't or didn't. And then he kind of remained and said there was a lot of people confused about it, and we're waiting on intel updates from the ground. And as a former cavalryman, I'll tell you what, our biggest job on the battlefield was to go and die and do crazy things on horseback and then collect intel and send it back to a main battle force by actually going and getting in the fight, traversing the battlefield. And it clearly looks like he didn't do that, even though he had maybe the means, the ability, whatever, to do so. But the jury obviously found that he didn't rise to the level, and we'll talk about some of those charges here in a minute. But what say you, Chris Sherwin, as a school resource officer in Florida?
So, I watched the trial on it, and I read articles and stuff like that. And one of the big things that kept being repeated was the fact that, wow, I was waiting for intel. I was given intel. I couldn't do this. I tried getting a code red. I did this, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Here, the bottom line is, you get on your radio, you say you have shots fired in the school, and you go take care of business, period. If it didn't come across, somebody's going to call. Somebody's coming at some point. It could be, a minute delay, a 5-minute delay, whatever. But, my job is to communicate and take care of take care of the situation. If I communicate and it doesn't come across, well, there's nothing more I can do, because once I get that communication out there as clear as that I can, as I'm running towards the threat, I have to hope that somebody either because your radio's not going to work everywhere every time. Then you go take care of business, and then you communicate again. But the one thing that I kept, I'm trying to get intel. I was trying to get intel, get intel out. I was trying to, get a gunshot is intel. That's right. Intel. Yeah. That is your intel.
The door that you're standing at that you can go in is intel.
And if you're not being shot at or shooting something in that doorway, you're in the wrong doorway. Like, and when you get into the school and you hear gunshots, sometimes the echo, you may go the wrong way. You may, but you'll figure it out as you go. You may not. There's a lot of variables. You're going to have the fire alarm going off. Probably there's going to be a lot of variables, people screaming, and the intel is the gunshot, and you go to it until you find it. You move around until you find it. You don't stand out there and make sure. My number one priority is to communicate, then take care of take care of business. If my communication does not work, that is not my job, is to recommunicate it till somebody goes 10-4 on the way. That's not my job. My job is to send it over and go do what I need to do to save the kids. Right. Not it. And again, going back to all this intel gathering, I'm trying to get stuff across. That's not your job. Everybody else who comes in, okay, that is their job, to start setting things up, moving people around, getting what you need. But their first priority is to find me and or the gunman and do what they need to do to end threat. Then after that, you start setting up, perimeters, and you have hot zones, you have cold zones, you get the paramedics in there. But all of that to start, you hear gunshots, you go. And seriously, when I leave the house in the morning, I know that at the end of the day, I possibly may have a street named after me, because that's my job. And I accept that, and I will not hesitate. And I tell myself every day, and I pray, God, don't let me hesitate. That split second where I hear it and go, just like everybody was like, was that a gunshot? And then I will react, because I know it, because I practice it every day. And you don't have the luxury to say, well, hey, I need, SWAT over here or SWAT over there. And it's because it's not, you're wasting time. People are dying and people are getting hurt. Your job is to go in and take care of the situation, no matter what it is. And it's like I said, as far as gunshots go, that's your primary intel. You don't stand behind a pillar and try and get communication out.
Chris, I'm going to tell you this just real quick, Scott, before you get on here. If they ever dedicate a street to you, the Krzysztof Schwarzinski way, I'm going to be crunked on Polish potato vodka. One, just to get through the emotions of it, and then two, just to celebrate you.
Dude,
so, do that.
So I just went, everybody knows that my dad just passed, and I actually found, we'll keep talking, but I'll pull it up here. I actually found how it was spelled, and I'll spell it for everybody. But I mean,
so what outline? We say Schwarzinski, we're not kidding.
They had to add like another 6 inches to the sign to get all.
Are you ready? Here it is: SWIERCZYNSKI.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, I can imagine that poor guy at Ellis Island trying to figure that shit out. Could you imagine that? What?
One more time.
Your name's Sherwin now.
Yeah, you will be known as Sherwin.
You'll be known as Sherwin. Move along. Next for delousing.
Could you imagine articles on me? Half the page is my name. But anyway.
I would have to buy that headstone twice. You know what I mean? You're such a pro.
That's why the Polacks get those big things, because we need all the room for our names. You get those monuments. We can't afford that shit.
Wow. Just going away at that thing up there.
Michelangelo's still making my great grandfathers.
Yeah, we got to get back on the rails here.
Yeah, there's a tuck pointing business at the intersection of his street too.
Right. I know guys that got 3 guys
street in Florida.
Yeah,
Schwarzinski Way.
Yeah, right.
Anyway.
Schwarzinski.
But anyway,
Scooter, what say you, buddy?
Well, I mean, Chris hit a lot of the points there. We've talked about this, and the problems that come along, not problems, but the responsibilities that come along with being an SRO. You think none of us were ever SROs before Chris was doing it down there, but we all know the value that comes from that SRO position, and just the relationships that you develop with these kids and the teachers, and just the way things operate in the school, and the intel that you get on the people that could be problematic. Now, that wasn't the case in this one, but people expect you in that role as that SRO to address those problems if, God forbid, those things happen in those schools. And I'm sure that this guy probably shit his pants as soon as this started happening. And he's like, oh my God, I'm 2 years away from retirement. I can't believe this is happening. What am I going to do? I'm here by myself, kind of thing. But hey, man, at the end of the day, that is what you are there for. And to Chris's point, like, hey, yeah, I'm going to tell you, I'm at door 5. Okay. And I'm going in here. This is what I hear here. I'm going in, and people know where you're going in. And of course, you never know what you're going to encounter in there. I mean, maybe you get 30 seconds inside of the school and people are running to you, or kids, you're able to tell, like, well, I know it's coming from somewhere down this hallway, and you're able to give a quick bit of information. But to Sean's point about like relating it to the battlefield, that's what you're doing. You're moving, you're advancing. It's your responsibility. It's what you're there for. It's your responsibility to the public, to the kids, to your job assignment. I mean, it's terrible. Yes. There's a very good chance you may not walk away from that, or you may walk away from that with some type of career-ending injury. Right. But you have a job to do. And I guess the thing that I go back to is, over the last 23 years, I've never been in that kind of a situation. I've never been involved in a school shooting. I've been involved in some situations that I'm not going to lie, like, oh my gosh, this is a little
Right.
scary, but you got to do what you got to do. And you have to trust yourself, your training, your skill set to go in there and do that. And if you are not in a position and you don't feel capable of telling yourself, hey, this is what I have to do and this is what it might take, then you shouldn't be doing it.
And I think that's super important, Scott, because you have to know what your limitations are. And I think you have to know, like, for example, you guys did drug work. I could never do undercover work. I don't care what you do. I could grow my hair long, tattoo. It doesn't matter. My mannerisms and everything, I scream cop, and I do.
Chris, you could have pushed powder, buddy. You know that business. You could have pushed powder, brother.
I mean, I got to know
all those guys,
but I can't, and that's like my limitation. As much as I wanted to do that, that's just I couldn't pull it off because it just I didn't have the chemical or physical or mental makeup to do that. But in this instance, when you go to be an SRO, the first thing you have to realize, just like when you do drug work or anything else, everything in police work is dangerous. But when you're going into a specialty unit, whether it's SWAT or narcotics or SRO or some other instances,
or canine,
right?
Those guys getting shot every day. Yeah. Those guys.
So you have to know in your head that this now has gone from, yes, I can be shot, to the next step of I'm going to be shot at some point, and you have to put that through. And listen, if that's something that you don't want to entail, that doesn't make you a bad policeman. You're still putting your life on the line to go on the road, and You're putting your life on the line for other people. It doesn't make it it doesn't make you any less of a policeman. Just like I can't do narcotics. It doesn't make me any less of a policeman. It's just something that
it's just not your forte, and you got to know what you're good at.
It's not my skill set. And if I pursued that, I know that at some point I would have gotten myself hurt somebody, or gotten somebody hurt. And that's not what I want to do. And I knew that going in, and as horrible as it felt, because I wanted to do it, my job was not to put other people at risk. My job was to help people. And you have to take that. When you look at this job as an SRO, you've got to remember that is your first thing. You have to eat a shit sandwich if the time comes.
Mm-hmm. And how much training? I mean, Sean knows, doing training for so many years, like what you referenced, the Columbine thing. When we were all new cops, it was like, that was the biggest thing that had happened. And they talked about how horrible it was. And like, this is the way that we're changing the response to these kinds of things. So it's not like this was some new concept, or I don't really understand what you guys do in these situations. Like, bullshit. Like, we've been training this way for decades now.
And look how that evolved. Remember when we first started, it was 4 people, then it was 3, and now it's like, you better get your shit and go.
Right. Mm-hmm. And communicating, what you're doing, where you're moving, but you are it. And sometimes I think that was a thing. And I used an example of this tragic event at the police academy when I was doing stuff there and talking to these new recruits. And I said, do you want to be this guy that is the one standing there with all kinds of dead kids laying around because of your inaction and not doing what you're supposed to do? And I'm not trying to like teach a lesson off the backs of these children who were killed. What I'm trying to impart is, how does this make you feel? Do you have, to your point, Chris, like, how does this make you feel? Do you feel like I could handle this? I could work through this. I could do this? Or does this something, when you hear this and see the details of this and go, holy shit, I think I might freeze. Right. You know what I mean? And if you are, again, you need to just think about, one, you need to work on that.
Sure.
To try to find a way to work through that. But maybe this isn't your forte. Maybe that thing with the kids thing would just be too overwhelming to you. And that's okay. Like you said,
right.
Because that might not be the assignment for you, but it shouldn't just be like, hey, we put these guys out to pasture at these jobs because they're easy and they walk around and BS with the kids in the school. No, you are still a cop till the end. You still have that responsibility to the end. And I hope to God you're not 2 weeks away from retirement and you get in a shootout with a crazy guy in a school. Right. But guess what? Right. That is the reality.
Right. Right. And then everything, a lot of this stuff, you're, as policemen, we all get that. Like when you first see a dead body, you get that second hesitation, or you hear that gunshot, you get that second hesitation. It's overcoming that. Are you able to overcome that and go do what you need to do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And clearly in this case, all right, whatever his excuses are, and I'm not going to, I don't want to armchair quarterback anybody, but in that instance, your job is to go in, save those kids, and do your job. There's nothing else. Communicate and take care of the task at hand. That's it. There's
TCB.
nothing else.
TCB, right?
TCB.
Just like the guys in Nashville did. I mean, and the guy in the incidents in Texas.
Right. But even look at the one in Nashville. Remember, when you're watching the video, the one guy who ended up taking care of the threat with the guy in front of him, the guy in front of him heard the one gunshot, and he's like, and he even had to push him, move, and the guy did, and he went there,
right?
Yeah, and they both started moving. They both took care of business. So it's even that you have that in you, but the guy was in the building, and you have and he went. This guy stood out there and he tried to make excuses, and the last thing I want to do is not ever want to make excuses for why I didn't do what I was
17 kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why I hesitated for 17 children to die. And then
his attorney felt, his attorney's named Mark Iglarish, I think I'm saying that right. The only thing I really saw about the guy is at least the photos of him on the internet are he's reminiscent of a young Paul Rubens, P.B. Herman looking guy. But he felt that there was a malicious prosecution on the prosecutor's part. And Chris had mentioned something about armchair quarterbacking people. That's what he brought up. He said, well, this is, a malicious prosecution of my client, for people that want to armchair quarterback every cop in America that makes the decision. Now, we do get armchair quarterbacked a lot on a lot of circumstances on this, but I think this has fallen on deaf ears. I think largely in the law enforcement community. There are, we're not speaking on behalf of everyone, but there are people that spoke in the state of Florida about this, and they did a study on it. And Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission's initial report found that, and this is, look it up. You can Google that. It was commissioned in 2019 of January of 2019, and they called his response abysmal. And it was an unsatisfactory law enforcement's response. And they said he was derelict in his duty and failed to act consistently with his training. He fled to a position of personal safety while crews shot and killed Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School students and staff. Peter was in a position to engage crews and mitigate further harm to others, and he willfully decided not to do so. Look, I'm sorry, this is just me talking now. When I watched that video, I agree with him on that. Look, right. I'm sorry. You push to it. Even you stop communicating to get to that threat. Nobody's going to know anything in the 5 seconds that you stop, that you can pull that trigger 1 point something seconds while you're assessing. If you're on top of people that are just cowering in place, like a lot of people had a tendency to do, that's lives. Every time that's going, every time that clock goes, you hear that shot going. He could have been there. And what we used to say, what's the bonus of getting shot at? And we'd say in training, and people look at you like, there's no bonus to that. I'm like, yes, there's absolutely a bonus to that. One, if you're not dead, he's not shooting them. He's shooting at us. We're engaging him. We're drawing him away. They can escape. We can do what we need to do. It's like really simple stuff in that sense. It's like very primal, and you got to do it. You just got to get through that wall. And if you can't, you have to be a man or a woman and step forward and say, I just can't do this. I just can't. I'm hanging on for the sweet pension. I'm hanging on for this. I'm hanging on for that. This does us irreparable harm. They're trying to now in a civil suit recreate the whole thing using blanks and shots and all sorts of stuff so they can sue him civilly. And Scot Peterson saying, oh, well, this put my family through hell. Oh, what about the families that are going through hell every day with an empty space at their dinner table? I'm sorry. I know this sounds harsh, but I practical experience. There are some things worse than death. Yeah. And whether he was prosecuted for this or not is something we should be concerned about. I mean, at what point would they stop now? I tried to do everything I could. That's what he said. And there's video proof that I think he didn't. Look, my radio ain't working anymore. Oh, well.
Right. It doesn't mean you're out of the game.
Find me standing over the guy. I can pick up my cell phone and go, yeah, as far as I know, the threat's down. Right. I'm on my phone. I'm probably doing an adrenaline dump, but I can call 911 and give them information. I'm going to be honest with you, my experience with that, the radio is so cumbersome with traffic, you couldn't communicate. We were on an objective for several minutes before people even knew what was going on because it's just chaos. It's total chaos. and you got to deal with it.
Right. And then when we train in scenarios just like this, and I'm going to tell everybody, if your communication doesn't get out when you're by yourself and it initially happens, the radio gets jammed. You as an SRO, once you put that out there, you try and give updates, good luck with that.
Yeah, get to work.
Because everybody's trying to get to you to help you, to save the kids, set up perimeters, set up a command post, get people in charge of buildings, save the kid. I mean, there's so much going on, and the radio is going crazy that you're
probably not even hearing half of what they're even saying to you, because you're
even in training,
complete tunnel vision. Yeah.
Right.
Auditory exclusion.
And he tried to lay it back on training, and that, he didn't know and was intel and things like that. Look, there are a lot of things in training you can't possibly recreate. We used to try to make it as realistic as possible when we did it. And the confusion's the biggest part of it. And the guys and the gals that were gems were the ones that said, all right, I'm going to try this, but I'm not just going to stick here and analysis paralysis and just stand here and go, well, I got to give an update. I got to give an update. There are things going on in there that I need to neutralize first, and then I can give an update. All of this stuff you're trying to get out. Well, you should give an update. So I had guys that were bleeding me telling me that. I'm like, well, while you're fucking around with the radio, people are dying. Get in there and deal with it. And you'd find them in training. You'd be like, all right, that's a person that on the street is going to make a good decision, because we didn't give anybody a heads up on what the training was going to be. And every week, people would come through the training weekly we started bringing firefighters into the equation, who were another set of people that had these misconceptions about what we could and couldn't do in there. But then they also had some great ideas on how to save lives and how to push towards threats. And some of them were willing to go as far as they could with us in that. And it was like, this has progressed to the point where it's modern day warfare in a school, and it's pathetic that has to happen so much, or a mall or an airport or whatever we're talking about. But the bottom line is like, anybody that says that they didn't know that's what drives the police world nuts, because every cop you meet is going through active shooter training every year. Every state has a qualification, a requirement for you to do that. So much so that we have firefighters coming in on this stuff with us. It's called Rescue Task Force, where we escort these guys in once we know the threat is no longer an active threat, and we can start saving people. And if we have firemen that are unarmed, that are just wearing plates, ceramic plates to protect themselves from gunshots, there's no excuse for a cop to not do their job. And if you go down, guess what your body is? It's intel. It's intel for the next cop coming in, like, oh, yeah,
he's this way.
This must be the way it's going. I got to get after it. And the thing I'd say to you is that I do get a little concerned when people are just trying to use these as like, all right, well, this cop didn't do enough. This cop didn't do enough. This cop didn't get there in time. This cop didn't do this, didn't do that. If this guy was convicted, what do you guys think would have happened with us? Like, if it was cops in that jury box, like I said, the reality of it is he would have got jammed. He would have.
Exactly. So I think, if he were convicted, I think what would happen is, I think that there would be a whole different type of an evaluation in regards to who they put in as SROs. I think that they would start talking to people a little bit more serious about, hey, do you see this case? Do you see what's going on? And are you able to make sure that that doesn't happen to you? That not only do you have to live with the death of 17 children, but now you're going to be convicted and go to jail. And now you're going to jail as a child neglect, which is just as bad as a child molester. You're going to have to spend the rest of your life running from everybody on the inside. So I think that they would probably have more one-on-one conversations about coppers and deputies and everything that are in schools. Like, do you realize what this takes?
I read the what the prosecutors charged him with, and then obviously where it seems that doesn't really quite fit the whole negligent caregiver, because I understand the premise behind what the charge was, but that it doesn't really fit. So on one hand, if you're gonna prosecute that way and that person for that inaction, then it's got to be something specific, that it doesn't become some type of broad brush that it just opens the floodgates for charging police with all kinds of different things. You know what I mean? It has to, it has to be, like Chris's point, it has to fall under some type of specific circumstances that you didn't there was inaction in these specific circumstances, not just kind of a catch-all kind of thing. So again, I'm not making excuses for him, or I'm not saying that there should have been more accountability. I'm just saying that it has to, like any crime, okay?
Right,
like any crime,
sure,
it has to fit what the person did wrong. Right. So, and yes, I think a jury of his law enforcement peers would have been much more, would have probably demanded more and would have highlighted more of that, his cowardice, and it probably would have had a different outcome if you had to put it just to law enforcement professionals. So, it's a sad day at the end of the day. This guy, we have all these kids that died. It's unfortunate that the person who committed these crimes didn't get the death penalty. I know there was some mental health related stuff there that I think, Chris had mentioned that probably impacted that. But this guy, I mean, I guess the real tragedy here, in addition to all these kids dying, this guy, how is this guy ever going to live with himself? I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't imagine living with myself after that. Like,
great point.
I'm a parent. I have had kids go through school. I know we have friends, Chris included, who are SROs or who have worked in the schools, where our kids went to school.
Right.
And to know that what that expectation is. And I couldn't imagine walking away from that and trying to justify to myself, well, I needed more intel, or, I needed a couple more minutes. I mean, I guess I would just be thinking, I can't hear one more kid scream. I'm getting in there and I'm going to fucking do something.
And here's the one other thing that I also think about, is that not only what you just said, Scott, and, I do believe in God and stuff and everything. And just imagine myself going up there and looking in God's eyes when I'm walking through the pearly gates and said, I didn't save your children. I not only could I not face the media, my family, my wife, myself, how am I going to do that? Especially if you're in this job is a calling, and however people want to react to it, this is somebody, a higher being, telling you, listen, every day you're going to put on a gun and you're going to put on a vest, and you may not come home to your family. Now, is that can that happen anywhere where you get hit by a bus? Yes, but you are physically putting on a vest and a gun, knowing that you're going out there in harm's way. This is a calling, and you have to answer for your actions to the world, to your family, and to your higher being. And that's what I think keeps me on the straight and narrow. And I think that's what keeps a lot of us on the straight and narrow, not coming back with all the excuses of why I didn't do what I was supposed to do.
Well said.
Yeah, and it's just truly an unprecedented case on so many levels. It's unprecedented in the fact is that, as in law enforcement, we can't believe that people still were like trying to claim that they didn't know, like, this was the training doctrine. And it's been going on for, like Scott said, a couple decades now. But at that time, it was probably about good 10 to 12 years that were like, you got to go and you got to go alone. So that is what makes that unique to a lot of us. The other thing that's unique is, like, we're prosecuting cops for reckless endangerment, like Scott talked about, where the mindset doesn't necessarily have to be there. Like, I'm purposely not doing this, but I know that my behavior could potentially lead to people. That's what in Illinois it's called reckless conduct, and there's a misdemeanor and felony charge for that. And you have to establish a lot of things, and then the flip side of that is that this guy is now a pariah. It's unprecedented that he now survived all of this, the gut punches that these families had to deal with. His was, I'm hoping, the final gut punch that these poor folks had to, like, contend with. Now, there's this civil side of the house, which potentially could lead, because as you all know, you don't need as much for the civil side to make somebody, culpable financially for that. How that's going to go through Broward County or wherever it's going to be with the case is yet to be seen. And maybe we can come back and talk about that. But the bottom line is, this is clearly unprecedented. I think the idea that he wasn't criminally charged, to agree, as much as I, don't agree with his actions and think that he was a coward in that, and that's just me talking, I don't know necessarily if criminal charges for an incident like that, or we're really ready for that yet, like as a society, because now you're going to get cops that are completely reluctant to want to do anything. They won't even come on the job. Yeah. And we it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about that down the road. But that being said, we figured we want to kind of talk about that a little bit and kind of cover that and get your thoughts. If you want to, provide us some information, please always do reach out. Yeah. We'll try to have some folks from there again. Maybe Chief Pastizzi can come back and talk with us a little bit about, like, what the feeling is on the ground. And Chris, if you hear from anybody.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And anybody's got any ideas, they have guests on that could, either, clarify some of the stuff that we're not talking about, or we don't know, that would be great. And any other suggestions you may have for shows or guests that you think that would be great on our show to kind of get the word out and kind of make sure that we get the truth out to everybody, the reality. Please go to please email us at 3copstalk@gmail.com. That's the number 3copstalk@gmail.com. Email us there. Any suggestions, any questions, any concerns, that would be great. Go to our website, 3copstalk.com. You could get episodes there, and also send us emails from there if you'd like. And then please go to where you get your podcast, download, leave a rating, leave a review, and tell your friends, because we really wanted to get the word out to make the world a better place. Thank you for listening.
Ever wanted to ask a police officer a question? Mail your questions to 3copstalk@gmail.com. That's the number 3, copstalk@gmail.com, and we'll answer them on the show. Follow us on Instagram at 3copstalk. That's the number 3 copstalk. Thanks for listening, and stay safe out there.